He called him boy like it was nothing, like it was normal, like the storm outside wasn't about to turn that luxury tower into a trap. But when the lights died, the lift stopped, and the billionaire's chest started tightening. The only person who knew how to get him out was the black engineer. He'd just humiliated, and the billionaire realized something too late. You can't buy your way out of a broken system if you've been the one breaking it. Quick one, where are you watching from today? Drop your city in the comments. And if you're here for dignity, fairness, and real accountability, hit like and subscribe. Now listen, the rain didn't fall that night. It attacked. It came down in sheets, so thick the city looked blurred, like someone had dragged wet paint across the skyline. The streets below Whitmore Tower shone like black glass. Headlights slid through puddles and vanished. High above the chaos, the top floors glowed warm and gold. Whitmore Tower was the kind of place that didn't feel the same weather as everyone else. Marble lobbies, silent lifts, a scent in the air that wasn't perfume exactly, but the idea of money. On the 46th floor, a gala was underway. Crystal glasses, tailored suits, dresses that moved like liquid, a string quartet playing something soft and expensive. A banner near the entrance read Whitmore Foundation, City Heroes Night. That was the irony, because 3 miles away, in a small terrace house, with paint peeling around the window frames, Marcus Reed was tightening the screws on a rattling front door, listening to his mum cough in the next room. Marcus wasn't dressed for a gala. He was wearing a dark work hoodie and steel-toe boots, damp at the ankles from a late shift that never ended when you were the sort of man people called when machines stopped behaving. He wiped his hands on his jeans and knocked gently on the bedroom door. "Mum," he said. A voice came back, thin but steady. "I'm all right. Come in." Marcus stepped inside and saw Lorraine propped up on pillows, inhaler on the bedside table, a blanket pulled high. Her eyes were tired in the way that came from fighting for breath, not sleep. "How's it feeling?" he asked. Lorraine gave a small shrug. "Same as always. The weather makes it worse." Marcus nodded. He didn't say the part that lived in his throat. The weather wasn't the only thing. Lorraine lived downwind of one of Whitmore Industries' redevelopment projects, which meant a constant churn of dust and diesel, and sometimes a smell that made the air taste like coins. Marcus had filed complaints, so had the neighbors. The responses were always polished and empty. "We take environmental impact seriously. We are working within regulations. We appreciate your feedback." Meanwhile, Lorraine's lungs kept arguing with the world. Marcus's phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at it and felt his stomach drop. Emergency call-out. Whitmore Tower. Lift failure. Possible trapped occupants. It was the kind of message you didn't ignore, not if you knew the difference between a stuck lift and a death sentence. Marcus looked at his mum. Lorraine saw his face and already knew. "Go," she said before he could speak. "That's your work." Marcus hesitated. "I can call someone else." Lorraine's eyes sharpened. "You are someone else. You are who they call." Marcus exhaled slowly, bending to kiss her forehead. "I'll be quick," he said. Lorraine's hand touched his wrist. Light, warm. "Just come back," she whispered. Marcus nodded, even though he never promised things storms could break. He grabbed his tool bag, pulled up his hood, and stepped back into the rain. By the time Marcus reached Whitmore Tower, his hoodie was heavy with water. His boots squeaked on the polished stone at the entrance. A canopy stretched above, but the rain still found him, dripping from every edge like it wanted inside. 2 security men stood at the door. Tall earpiece, the kind of posture that said they'd been trained to stand still and look threatening. Marcus approached calmly. "Evening. Lift engineer. Emergency out." One of the guards looked him up and down in a single, slow scan. "Side entrance," he said, pointing without meeting Marcus's eyes. "Deliveries and staff." Marcus kept his tone even. "I'm not deliveries. I'm here for the lift. People might be trapped." The guard's expression didn't change. "Side entrance," he repeated. Like Marcus was asking for a favor instead of trying to prevent someone dying. Marcus glanced past them into the lobby. Marble floors, warm lights, a few guests, drifting near the reception area, champagne in hand. Someone laughed, high and careless. He stepped slightly to the side to get a clearer view. The second guard moved to blocking him. "Don't do that," the guard said. Marcus blinked. "Would do what?" "Try to slip in," the guard replied. "We've got an event upstairs." Marcus's jaw tightened. "I'm not trying to slip in. I'm trying to reach the lift control room." The first guard's lips twitched, not a smile, more like amusement. "Control room," he repeated. "Right. And I'm the king." Marcus felt the heat rising. He swallowed it down. "Call your building manager," Marcus said. "Tell them I'm here. It's a lift emergency." The guard leaned closer, voice lower, meaner. "Listen, mate, I'm not calling anyone for you. Go round the back and wait like everyone else." Everyone else? Marcus stared at him, rain dripping off his chin. "Someone's stuck," Marcus said. The guard shrugged. "Then they'll wait, like you." Behind them, a woman in a silk dress slowed to watch. Her phone lifted casually, recording without shame. Marcus saw it. He felt that old familiar burn of being turned into entertainment. He lowered his voice. "You're filming this, yeah? Film it properly then. Film the part where you stop an engineer responding to an emergency." The woman's eyes widened slightly. The phone dipped. The guards didn't move. The first guard spoke again, colder now. "You keep arguing, and I'll have you removed." Marcus's breath came out slow. Then, from the lobby, a man approached. Not a guard, not staff, not a guest in the usual way. He moved, like the building belonged to him. Silver hair, broad shoulders, a sharp suit that didn't wrinkle, a face you'd seen on billboards, next to words like legacy and vision. Charles Whitmore, the billionaire, the man whose company name was on half the cranes in the city. He walked up with a glass in his hand, eyes slightly narrowed, like he'd smelled inconvenience. "What's going on?" he asked. The guards straightened. Their whole energy changed. Respect snapped into place, sir. One of them said quickly, "We've got a bloke trying to get in. Claims he's lift maintenance." Charles looked at Marcus like he was a stain. "Lift maintenance," Charles repeated, voice smooth, dismissive. Marcus forced, his tone professional. "Yes, sir. Emergency call-out. Failure. Possible trapped occupants." Charles's eyes flicked over him. Wet hoodie, tool bag boots. Then he said it casually, like it meant nothing. "Boy, you can't just walk into my building looking like that." Marcus froze. Not because he'd never heard it, because hearing it in 2025, in the middle of a storm, from a man celebrating City Heroes Night, was its own kind of sickness. Marcus kept his voice low. "I'm not here to celebrate. I'm here to fix a lift." Charles took a sip of his drink, then go to the staff entrance. "That's what it's for, sir," Marcus said, holding the line. "Time matters. If someone's trapped, they could be in danger." Charles's gaze sharpened, annoyed now. "You think I don't know my own building?" Marcus didn't answer. He didn't want to say what he was thinking, that you can own a building and still know nothing about how it stays alive. Charles turned slightly to the guards. "Get him out of the way," he said, as if Marcus was a misplaced chair. "We have donors arriving." Then, as he started to walk away, he added, without looking back, "and wipe the floor after he leaves. He's soaking." Marcus stood there, rainwater dripping onto marble that was apparently more important than him. For a second, he considered turning around, letting the lift stay broken, let the tower deal with its own arrogance. But then his phone buzzed again, a second alert. Lift car stalled. Occupants inside. Medical risk noted. Marcus's stomach went cold. He looked at the guard. "I need to get upstairs now." The guard shook his head. "Back entrance." Marcus stared at the lobby. Then he made a decision. He stepped back into the rain, walking fast around the side of the building, boots splashing through puddles, jaw locked. Not because he was obeying, because he was counting seconds. The staff entrance was a metal door beside the loading bay. Half-lit, buzzing with cheap fluorescent light. The smell back there wasn't champagne. It was bins and wet cardboard. A cleaner glanced at Marcus and moved aside without question. Marcus swiped his contractor card, then took the service corridor that led towards the lift control room. The building sounded different behind the scenes. You could hear it breathe. Fans, vents, humming electricity. Except tonight, something was wrong. The hum was inconsistent. A stuttered dot. Marcus reached the control room door, keyed in, and stepped inside. The panel lights were blinking. One lift car, frozen between floors. Marcus leaned in to check the diagnostic screen. He didn't like what he saw. A surge event, a partial power loss. The lift had switched to safety mode, but the backup system was struggling. Storm damage, maybe, or an overloaded circuit. He grabbed his radio and called security control. Lift maintenance. Marcus Reed. Which car is stalled? A crackle. Then, a voice. Car BVIP Bank. 41st to 46th. VIP Bank. Marcus closed his eyes for a second. That was the lift that served the gala floor. The lift Charles Whitmore used. Marcus forced himself to stay calm. How many occupants? He asked. The voice hesitated. Not sure, but the manager says Mr. Whitmore is inside. Marcus's chest tightened. Is anyone panicking? Any medical issues? He asked. The voice lowered. They're saying Mr. Whitmore is short of breath. Marcus didn't waste another second. He grabbed his harness, torch, and emergency key, then moved fast towards the shaft access as he ran through the corridor. He heard the building manager on the radio, voice sharp with panic. We need this fixed now. Do you understand? Now, Marcus muttered under his breath. Should have let me in the front then. He reached the access point and keyed the panel open. The shaft door released with a click. Marcus peered into darkness that smelled like oil and metal. He clipped on, checked his line, and stepped into the shaft, moving down carefully to reach the stalled car. His torch beam cut through the void. Somewhere below, he heard it. A voice. A man trying not to sound scared. Failing. The lift car was stuck between the 44th and 45th floors, slightly tilted. Through the gap, Marcus could hear muffled conversation. A woman crying softly. Someone knocking on the door. Marcus dropped down to the top of the car, boots landing with a metallic thud. He crouched, found the emergency hatch, and called out through it. Hello, lift engineer here. Can you hear me? Silence for a beat. Then, Charles Whitmore's voice, strained. Finally, he snapped. Get us out. Marcus's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed professional. I need everyone to stay calm. Is anyone injured? A man's voice answered, shaky. He can't breathe properly. Marcus swallowed. He opened the hatch carefully and looked down. Inside the lift car were 5 people. Packed close, sweating despite the cold outside. A couple in gala attire. One staff member, Charles Whitmore, standing rigid, one hand gripping the rail, the other pressed against his chest. His face was pale. His eyes were wide, with something like fear. Not the fear of being trapped, the fear of losing control. Marcus spoke clearly. Mr. Whitmore, I need you to sit down. Charles's eyes snapped to him through the hatch. You could see the moment he recognized Marcus. The wet hoodie, the face at the door. His expression twisted. Part anger, part embarrassment. You, Charles rasped. Marcus ignored it. Sit down, sir. Slow breaths. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Charles tried to breathe. His breath hitched. I don't. He started, then coughed, harsh and dry. The woman beside him reached out. Charles, please. Charles shook his head like he didn't want to be touched. Marcus's voice stayed steady. Do you have a condition? Asthma. Heart issues. Charles hesitated, pride battling reality. Then, in a smaller voice, he said, angina. Marcus nodded. Do you have medication? Charles's hand fumbled inside his suit jacket. His fingers trembled. Marcus felt a quiet anger rise. This man had called him boy 10 minutes ago. Now, he couldn't even control his own hands. Charles pulled out a small spray bottle, then froze, looking at Marcus like he didn't want to ask. Marcus didn't wait. Use it, he said, firm. Now Charles sprayed under his tongue. His eyes squeezed shut. The other occupants watched Marcus like he was the only solid thing in the room. Marcus moved quickly, checking the door locks, checking the alignment. The backup power flickered. The lift shuddered slightly. A woman screamed. Marcus raised his voice. "Everyone keep still. Do not jump. Do not force the doors." Charles glared up through the hatch. "Just get me out." Marcus looked down at him, eyes steady. "I'm trying to keep you alive, sir." The words landed harder than any insult. Charles went quiet. For a moment, the only sound was rain drumming against the building. "Be honest. If someone who disrespected you was suddenly depending on you to survive, would you still help them?" Comment yes or no node. Because what Marcus does next tells you exactly who he is. Marcus reached for the manual override, but the system wasn't responding cleanly. The storm had knocked out part of the tower's external power, and the backup generator was struggling. The lift was locked in failsafe mode. If Marcus forced it wrong, the car could drop a few inches, enough to injure someone, enough to trigger a full system lock. Marcus breathed slowly, thinking. Then his radio crackled again. "Marcus," the building manager said urgently. "Where are you? What's taking so long?" Marcus pressed the talk button. "I'm on top of the car. We've got a medical situation. I need the generator stabilized." "We're trying," the manager snapped. Marcus's voice stayed calm, but harder now. "Try faster." He switched channels and called control. "Send a paramedic to the 45th floor landing," Marcus said. Now, a pause. Then, security says, "We can't let emergency services through the front. Media risk." Marcus's blood turned hot. He leaned close to the radio, voice low. "Someone could die. Let them in." Another pause. Then the voice, quieter. "Mr. Whitmore said no. He doesn't want a scene." Marcus stared into the lift car. Charles Whitmore, pale, sweating, still trying to hold on to control with both hands. Marcus called down, "Mr. Whitmore, we need paramedics." Charles's eyes snapped up. "No," Marcus blinked. "Sir, you're having trouble breathing." Charles gritted his teeth. "I will not have flashing lights outside my building. Do you understand?" Marcus blinked. "Sir, you're having trouble breathing." Charles gritted his teeth. "I will not have flashing lights outside my building. Do you understand?" Marcus held his gaze for a beat. Then he spoke, not like an employee, but like a man who'd spent too long watching pride kill people. "Sir," Marcus said, "your image is not worth your life." Charles's eyes flared. "Who do you think you are?" Marcus's voice stayed steady. "The person keeping you from passing out in a lift." Silence. The other occupants looked at Charles with a new expression. Not admiration. Need. Charles swallowed. His jaw trembled slightly. He didn't say yes, but he didn't say no again. Marcus pressed the radio. "Let the paramedics in. Front entrance." Now he released the button before anyone could argue. Then he focused back on the mechanism. He worked the manual system carefully, inch by inch, listening to the cable tension, feeling the vibration through his boots. Slowly, the lift car rose. A few inches, another few. The lights flickered again. Charles sucked in a breath, sharp. Marcus spoke down, calm. "You're doing all right. Keep breathing." Charles stared up at him, sweat on his forehead, eyes glassy. His voice came out smaller than Marcus expected. I can't feel my left arm properly." Marcus's stomach tightened. "Sit down," Marcus repeated. "Now." Charles lowered himself onto the floor, suit creasing, dignity folding with it. Marcus kept raising the car, aligning it with the landing. The lift jerked one last time, then settled. The doors below clunked unlocked. Marcus exhaled. "Okay," he called down. "Doors will open. Move slowly. Help him out." The staff member inside the car pushed the button. The doors slid open to the 45th floor landing. Bright corridor lights flooded the car. 2 paramedics were already waiting, having been let in through the front, after all. They stepped forward fast. Charles looked up at Marcus through the hatch one last time. His face was still pale, but the look in his eyes had changed. It wasn't gratitude yet. It was confusion, like his brain was trying to reconcile something he'd spent his whole life avoiding. As the paramedics helped Charles onto a chair, one of them glanced up at Marcus through the open doors. "You're Marcus Reed?" the paramedic asked. Marcus blinked. "Yeah," the paramedic nodded quickly. "Your mom's been admitted." "Lorraine Reed, breathing difficulties. They called your number. It went to voicemail." Marcus felt the world tilt. For a moment, he could smell his mother's bedroom. That faint medicinal taste in the air. Her small hand on his wrist saying, "Just come back." He swallowed hard. Where he managed. "St. Mary's," the paramedic said. Marcus's hands tightened around the hatch edge. He looked down at Charles Whitmore, being checked over. The billionaire noticed Marcus's face, noticed the shift. "What's wrong?" Charles asked, voice hoarse. Marcus stared at him for a beat. "My mom," Marcus said quietly. "She's in hospital, breathing problems." Charles blinked. "Slow, now." Marcus nodded, jaw locked. Charles's eyes flickered, guilt or discomfort crossing his features like a shadow. The irony of it sat heavy between them. A man who owned the skyline, struggling for breath. A woman in a small house, struggling for breath. Both caught in systems built by choices. Marcus stepped back from the hatch, suddenly exhausted. He climbed off the lift, moving fast, unhooking his harness, ignoring the building manager's frantic questions. He walked past the gala floor, where donors were still holding drinks, pretending nothing happened. He reached the service corridor, then stopped, because a voice behind him said, sharp and soft, at the same time, "Marcus." He turned. Charles Whitmore was standing there, supported by a paramedic, face still pale. His eyes locked onto Marcus with something that wasn't arrogance anymore. It was fear, not of dying, of what he might have to admit if he didn't. "You saved me," Charles said quietly. Marcus didn't answer. Charles swallowed. "Thank you." Marcus's mouth tightened. "Let me pass," Marcus said. Charles hesitated. Then he stepped aside. Marcus walked away without looking back. But he could feel Charles watching him. Like the billionaire had just met a truth he couldn't write a check to erase. St. Mary's Hospital was bright, busy, full of the real world. No crystal glasses, no string quartets. Just the beeping of machines and the tired kindness of nurses who didn't care what your surname was. Marcus found his mum in a small bay, oxygen mask on, eyes half closed. Loren's hand lifted slightly when she heard his footsteps. "There you are," she whispered. Marcus sat beside her, throat tight. "I'm here." He didn't tell her where he'd been, not yet. Lorraine's eyes searched his face. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Marcus exhaled slowly. "I saw. A man who thinks he owns everything." Loren's gaze sharpened, and Marcus stared at the floor, and he couldn't breathe, Marcus said. "And I was the one who got him out." Lorraine was quiet for a beat. Then she said, gently, "Did you help him?" Marcus nodded once. Lorraine's voice softened. "Then you didn't lose yourself." Marcus swallowed hard, because that was the thing he'd been afraid of. Not that Charles Whitmore would die. That Marcus might become the kind of man who watched someone suffer and did nothing just to prove a point. Lorraine shifted slightly, winced, then whispered, "Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stay human." Marcus nodded, eyes burning. He stayed by her side until dawn. When he finally stepped outside, the rain had stopped. The city looked washed clean, like it was trying to pretend the night hadn't happened. Marcus's phone buzzed. A message from his employer, meeting 10 a.m. Urgent. Marcus knew that tone. It meant blame. It meant scapegoat. He arrived at the lift contractor office and was immediately escorted into a glass meeting room. Two managers sat there. The building manager from Whitmore Tower, a legal-looking woman with a folder. The building manager didn't bother with greeting. "Your conduct last night was unacceptable," he snapped. Marcus blinked. "My conduct? You embarrassed the client," the manager said. "You demanded emergency services. You made statements. You caused panic." Marcus stared. There was a medical emergency. The legal woman slid a paper across their allegations. "You delayed response time by refusing to use the correct entrance." Marcus felt a laugh rise, bitter and sharp, then die in his throat. "Are you serious?" Marcus asked. The building manager leaned forward. "You were told to use the staff entrance. You argued at the front. You wasted time." Marcus's jaw clenched. "I was blocked. I identified myself. I had an emergency clout." The building manager shrugged. "That's not our record." Marcus stared at them both. This was how it worked. Policy in a suit. Lies in bullet points. Marcus leaned back, voice low. "So you're blaming me for your security delaying emergency maintenance?" The legal woman's smile was thin. "We are stating facts." Marcus stood slowly. "Then state this fact." "Mr. Whitmore called me boy at the door." Silence. The building manager's eyes flicked. The legal woman's expression hardened. "That is irrelevant." Marcus laughed once, humorless. "Of course it is." Then the door opened, and the temperature in the room changed. Charles Whitmore walked in, not in a suit. In a plain dark jumper and simple coat, like he was trying to remove himself from the costume of power. Behind him was a man Marcus didn't recognize, carrying a tablet. Everyone in the room stood. The building manager's face went pale. Charles looked at Marcus first, then at the managers. "Sit," Charles said calmly. No one moved until he repeated it. "Sit." They sat. Charles placed both hands on the table. "I have reviewed the footage from last night," he said. The building manager swallowed. "Sir, we were just discussing how maintenance response was mishandled." Charles's eyes cut to him. "Mishandled by who?" Charles asked. The building manager's voice stuttered. "By the engineer. He refused the correct access route." Charles nodded slowly, then turned to the man with the tablet. "Play it," he said. The tablet screen faced the room. Security footage. Front entrance, Marcus in the rain, the guard blocking him. The manager's own voice faint in the background. And then Charles himself on camera, glass in hand, saying it. "Boy, you can't just walk into my building looking like that." The room went silent in a different way. Not tense, dead. Charles watched it all the way through. When it ended, he looked up. His voice was quiet. "That was me," he said. "That was my mouth. Those were my words." No one spoke. Charles looked at the legal woman. "You're going to pretend this is irrelevant to—" She stared, unable to answer. Charles turned to the building manager. "You blamed Marcus because it was easy," Charles said. "Because you assumed I would agree." The building manager's face flushed. "Sir, I was protecting the building." Charles's voice stayed calm. "No, you were protecting a culture." He leaned closer. "And last night, that culture nearly killed me." The building manager opened his mouth, then closed it. Charles straightened. "Marcus Reed is not being disciplined," Charles said. "He is being paid overtime, hazard bonus, and a personal apology from me." Marcus's chest tightened. Charles looked at him. "Marcus, I am sorry. It wasn't a grand speech. It wasn't performative." It sounded like the first time Charles Whitmore had said sorry without expecting the world to move on. Marcus didn't answer immediately. He didn't know if he could. Charles turned back to the room. "Now," he said, "we need to talk about why an entire security team felt comfortable treating a qualified engineer like an intruder." The building manager tried to speak. Charles lifted a hand. No, the word was soft, but it ended the argument. Charles nodded to the man with the tablet. "Pull up the complaints," he said. The tablet flashed with a list. Marcus's stomach dropped as he saw the heading. Discrimination Incident Log. Whitmore Tower. Pages of entries. Not one many. Marcus wasn't the first. He was just the one who happened to be there. When Charles Whitmore couldn't breathe, Charles stared at the list, face tightening. He looked at the building manager. "How long?" Charles asked. The manager whispered, "Sir, it's exaggerated. People misunderstand." Charles leaned forward again, eyes sharp. "How long?" he repeated. The manager swallowed. 2 years. Charles closed his eyes briefly. Then he opened them. "Pack your things," Charles said, effective immediately. "You're dismissed." The building manager's mouth fell open. "Sir, please." Charles's voice stayed flat. "Leave." The manager stumbled out, humiliation written all over him. Charles turned back to the legal woman. "And you," he said, "are going to help me build a system that stops this ever happening again. Or you can leave too." She nodded quickly. Charles looked at Marcus again. "Your mum," Charles said quietly. "She's in hospital." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Yes." Charles nodded once, like he was accepting responsibility for something he didn't know how to say. "What ward?" Charles asked. Marcus hesitated. "Why?" Charles's voice was low. "Because I need to see what my work looks like when it reaches the ground." Marcus didn't answer. Charles didn't push. He simply said, "I'll find out." And for the first time, Marcus felt something he hadn't expected. Not trust, not forgiveness, but movement. Like something stuck had finally started to shift. 2 days later, Marcus was leaving the hospital when he saw a man standing near the entrance, hood up, against drizzle. Not a security guard, not a driver, just a man holding a small paper bag, like he wasn't sure what to do with his hands. "Charles Whitmore." Marcus stopped, heart tightening. Charles lifted the bag slightly. "It's soup," he said, awkward. Marcus stared. Charles's mouth twitched, almost embarrassed. "The nurse told me your mom likes lentil. I didn't know if that was He trailed off. Marcus didn't move. Charles looked down. "I visited the street behind your house," he said quietly. "I saw the dust. I smelled it." Marcus's jaw clenched. "Now you've seen it." Charles nodded once. "I have." They stood in silence for a moment, the world moving around them. Ambulances, footsteps, life. Charles's voice came out softer. "I didn't understand," he said. "I thought. I told myself stories." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "What stories?" Charles swallowed. "That people should just work harder. That if someone's struggling, it's their fault. That certain areas are like that because the people are like that." Marcus felt anger rise. Charles continued, forcing the words out like they hurt. "And last night, in that lift, when I couldn't breathe, I looked up at you, and I realized I'd been living a lie that was comfortable for me." Marcus stared at him, rain dampening his lashes. Charles's voice shook slightly. "You could have left me. You had every reason. But you didn't." Marcus's throat tightened. "I'm not like you," Marcus said quietly. Charles nodded, eyes glassy. "I know, then." He said something Marcus didn't expect. "I want to change it," Charles said. "Not with donations that look good, with decisions that hurt." Marcus blinked. "What does that mean?" Charles exhaled. "It means shutting down contracts that make money but poison communities. It means funding medical support without branding. It means paying for remediation. It means firing people who behave like I did." Marcus studied him, searching for performance. Charles looked tired, real tired, like a man who'd been forced to meet himself. Marcus's voice was careful. "And what do you want from me?" Charles looked down at his hands. "I want you to tell me the truth," he said. "And I want you to be in the room when decisions are made that affect people like your mum." Marcus felt his chest tighten. Charles continued, "Steady now. I'm creating an independent safety and impact board. Not my friends, not my donors. People with lived experience, engineers, community leaders, health specialists. Marcus stared. Why me? Charles met his gaze. Because when it mattered, you kept your humanity. And because you know the building from the inside, not from the penthouse. Marcus didn't answer straight away. He thought of Lorraine's hand on his wrist. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stay human. Marcus looked at Charles Whitmore, the man who'd called him boy, the man whose choices had helped make his mother sick. Marcus spoke slowly. I'll do it, but not to save you. Charles nodded. To save them, Marcus's voice stayed firm. And you're going to apologize publicly. Charles's eyes flickered. I will, Marcus added. Not just for what you said, for what you built. Charles swallowed hard, then nodded again. Yes. A month later, Whitmore Tower looked the same from the outside. Glass, steel, lights, but inside, things were changing. New security protocols, new training, clear accountability. Marcus walked through the lobby one afternoon, dry hoodie, tool bag in hand, head up. The guards at the door nodded to him, without hesitation. Afternoon, Mr. Reed, one of them said. Not mate, not boy, not staff entrance. Mr. Reed. Marcus took the lift up, not the service one, the main one. And as the doors slid shut, he saw his reflection in the polished steel. A man who'd been tested by the world and stayed upright. When he reached the top, he stepped out into a meeting room, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a long table. Charles Whitmore was already there, not at the head of the table, but on the side. He stood when Marcus entered. Marcus, he said, simple. Marcus nodded once. Outside, the city stretched out, still wet from rain, still full of problems that didn't care about apologies. But in the distance, cranes were already moving away from Lorraine Street. Work crews were replacing dust with clean fencing, proper ventilation, real mitigation, not letters. Marcus's phone buzzed. A message from his mom. Breathing better today. Proud of you. Marcus's throat tightened. He looked out at the skyline. Sometimes change didn't arrive like fireworks. Sometimes it arrived like a quiet man in a wet hoodie, stepping into a room that used to shut him out, and refusing to let the door close behind him. If you believe people can change when the truth hits them hard enough, type change in the comments. And if you've ever been judged before you spoke, tell me where you're watching from. Like, share, and subscribe for more melanated stories.